All right, first things first. This is Brandon Flanagan. Brandon Flanagan. Flanagan. What a name.
First time ever on a podcast.
First time ever. Let's go back to Andy Fitzell, who's in Germany. For our listeners, thank you for your patience. We do now have the mics, and we got the GreatBase Tennis logo. We have a lot of content. Andy Fitzell has a background with all this, the lighting, the sound, editing. That certainly I don't have. And I said to Andy one time, I said, we made lots of educational videos, a little clip here, a little clip there. I said, I've known him a long time, 25 years. I said, there's a few videos that you probably didn't like. And he said, I didn't like any of them because the lighting was wrong, the camera was wrong. But let's go with this. Andres Barbosa was just here. We're in Boynton Beach, 2.5 hours south of Orlando. And Andres, great friend from Miami, is here to interview one of our students. And he asked Brandon how long he had known me. And we came up with a math, 21 years. Let's start with your tennis. Brandon is another upstate New Yorker. Two kinds of people in the world, those from upstate New York and those who wish they were. Hicks and slicks. Brandon is hick, like myself. But I was born in the very top of New York State in Potsdam, New York. Brandon is right there in the midsection, when you bend over and they call it the rear end. They used to say Albany, New York, and Troy is 10 miles up. But 21 years. Let's start with taking lessons from the great Joe McMahon.
Probably one of the best serves in history, I think. Better than Sampras, better than even Ivanisevic, just one of the best serves.
He could crack it.
Yeah, he was a really inspirational tennis coach for me. Coming from upstate New York, there weren't a lot of qualified tennis professionals, but he had spent some time with you in Rochester, where you taught him how to teach tennis, or certainly improved his ability to teach tennis big time. And so at 13, I joined a program that he was running at the Schenectady Racket Club. And after that, 2 years in that program, he introduced me to you, and I went down with a good friend of mine, still a good friend, Gabe Wapner.
Gabe
Wapner. At 15, we spent 2 weeks in Tampa at the Carrollwood Country Club. And that was an interesting experience, to say the least. But no, definitely what happened, I think, with being introduced to you and the toughness, the tough love, so to speak, was really huge for me to get that at that age, at 15.
A little crazy love too.
Yeah. So I was definitely molded very quickly into your approach on the court, and that was a big turning point for me. I really kind of played tennis socially. Upstate New York was not the easiest place in the world to get on a tennis court, and thankfully my grandmother put a racket in my hand at a young age, and always enjoyed it, but to really get the exposure to the level of coaching, the level of players and intensity you had, and that was a big turning point for me. So I know I've thanked you before, but thanks again for all that.
Well, Joe McMahon will thank you for the thanks. Joe became excellent at making slow motion videos. Our alumni, we need to connect with Joe McMahon. I sometimes just with students, I just go through my phone and the text messages and the emails I get in the course of a day. But no, Joe, he left tennis and came back to tennis, and left tennis, came back to tennis. But in the tennis profession, we could talk about it. It's such a crazy profession. But I was working for Alan Schwartz, Doug Cash, Tennis Corporation of America. Everybody likes to go back home. So it was great to go back to upstate New York tell us about, you went to Furman and Paul Scarpa. You talk a little bit about Paul Scarpa, another coach you worked with.
Yeah, amazing guy. He was at Furman, I believe, for close to 45 years, but during that time, he became the winningest coach in NCAA history, I believe. It might have been the winningest active coach, but he amassed hundreds and hundreds of wins in college tennis, and just an absolute legend of a coach and of a person. I think personality wise, I got so many different Paul Scarpa stories, but he carried a very big team. So, coming out of high school, spending a postgraduate year with you in Tampa, working on my game, it helped a lot, but I still didn't have any kind of, significant ranking, and wasn't really being actively recruited by anyone. I had to seek out some prospects myself and had a couple different options, but it really stood out to me that Furman's facilities were great. They played a great out of conference schedule, a lot of the SEC and ACC schools, and I was really intrigued by that. And then Coach Scarpa showed a lot of interest in me as a player, just based on his record of developing some players who came in, like Ned Caswell, who came in as a basketball player at Furman. I think it was number 13 out of 13 guys in the team, and by the time he was a junior, was number 1. And then he ended up, beating Patrick Mcenroe at the NCAAs, and he ended up becoming, I think, top 100 in the world. But he had a great track record of developing players while they were in college, and just a really interesting guy. But no, I enjoyed my experience there, and I would definitely do it all over again. Just a great school, great part of the world.
I know that's a lead into what you do now with your degree in exercise technology.
Yeah, so I have a degree in health and exercise science, and the education there was phenomenal, and a couple of great mentors in the exercise science field. Remember Dr. Reed was a big mentor of mine, but as an athlete, I was definitely interested in the physical side, and so after graduating Furman, I shortly after found my way in Delray Beach, Florida, and met a couple of people who owned a local gym, and they encouraged me to get my professional certification as a personal trainer, and that led to to me doing some off-court work with some tennis players, just purely from a fitness standpoint.
I remember with Paul Scarpa, and our listeners, everybody loves Paul Scarpa. He was a really, really good player. Stayed, as you said, he was at Furman forever. We sent him a video, and he was just so impressed with the technical background. But, having grown in upstate New York and not having played a lot of tennis, and then you had a lot of problems with injuries when you took that gap period. You almost went the whole year without being able to play.
Right, without being able to serve, yeah.
Yeah, with to digress with Paul Scarpa, do you know the Yahoo?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You know that story? Tell that story.
It's a great story. So Paul Scarpa speaks like this. He's got a very deep Southern accent. And,
gentleman.
He's a gentleman and a scholar. But Andy will have to tell you what movie that's from. But no. So Paul, Coach Scarpa, he had kind of had some interesting, fortunate things happen in his life. One of them was he invested in Yahoo stock very early on, before the internet bubble, in the stock market. And one of the guys who was interested in that kind of thing asked him one day, said, "Coach, how did you have the knowledge to invest so much of your money into Yahoo at such an early point?" And he says, "Well, I just always thought it was a very delicious chocolatey drink."
That's funny.
But that's kind of the guy. That's the kind of guy that he is. Just very humble, kind of just Southern guy.
One thing with Paul Scarpa, I tell young college coaches, have your own tennis camp. In all fairness to the Wilson camp and the Nike camp, have your own tennis camp. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago with the late Don Meyer. Be at your camp every minute. Don't just be there for the registration and the farewell to the parents when they come and pick their kids up. But I know that he's from the era where the coaches had a very small salary and they really had to make their money running their camp.
His camp was really, really well known and well run, and he was out there with the kids, and he would have all types of games and teaching aids. And he would bring out one of those small play school basketball hoops, and have kids, work on their serve with the basketball hoop. I never did work the camp, although I wish I did. It would have been a lot of fun. But no, he was out there on the court with the kids, and they would do all types of things, from tennis skits to all types of different creative drills. But he was totally into it, and I think that's one great thing to say about him as well, is he was just as into running the summer camp as he was to coaching high level players on the tennis team.
I know somebody that you spent a lot of time with, Chad Berryhill. I made a presentation with Chad. We were just trying to boost his resume, and we made a presentation at the ITA. I mean, he started as a head coach with us when he was 22, a junior college program. And, we put a presentation on where your team and your camp, they're one and the same. And years ago, they were. Years ago, a college freshman didn't compete. They came in, and it's like Stan Smith with George Foley. He said, okay, that year I learned how to volley. With going back also to the prep year, when you took that year off, it was so different because the rule was that you could take a year off between high school and college. And some people would do it to improve their SAT scores, but also to improve their tennis. And the level of improvement that you and others made was really phenomenal. But now the rule is when you graduate from high school, you have a grace period of 6 months. And I mean, trust and verify, so the rules are forever changing. But now we have kids take the gap year. They really repeat grade 8. They don't repeat the academic work. But tell us a little, just a few things come to your mind with, I know we could really digress. It would be so much fun to just tell John Posey stories. He was there with you at that time, right?
Yeah.
We'll tell a few John Posey stories, but tell us what comes to your mind when you think of taking that gap year before you went to Furman.
Oh, we would put in some days. We would put in some serious days. We were there early in the morning. It was either at certain points we were there at 7 a.m., but say it's 8 a.m. and then we'd be feeding balls to the local, recreational adults until 8:30 at night at the Wanna Workout.
No, we had it set up where it cost X plus, but if you were a student assistant, it cost X minus, and obviously most people did that, so it was a work study. But you were out of school, and some of you were still trying to improve your SAT scores. But it was really so much different than now, where now we have kids at different ages, and they have homeschool. They have the non-traditional schooling. They have to do 5 hours of schoolwork.
All right.
And with, I know Raven was there. Raven Clausen, he was on one of the podcasts, and I remember Roberto Calla, who obviously was one of your coaches for a long time with us. And Raven was in the Wimbledon final. He said, how many people would know that he ran the Dollar Clinic?
Yeah.
I said, but before he ran the Dollar Clinic, he just had to observe and participate. But what comes to your mind with that prep year off?
Oh, I think a lot of the, for example, on one court, you would have someone like a Raven who at that time was, still playing singles and was top, 300 in the world. And he's on one court. And on the very next court, you have kind of a 7-year-old kid hitting off the cone, and it's just, I don't think there's many other places that something like that really goes on, to that level. But just to think of all the young players now, I remember working with Jackie Calla, endless hours in the court with her, sock and cone, and just building the fundamentals, and a lot of young players like her. But it was a great program. I mean, now local guy Brent Wellman was, he's in Delray Beach. He was doing the fitness and
great enthusiasm for tennis.
Yeah, loves
transfer from basketball.
Yeah, and so no, I think the HCC was kind of a hidden gem, really. And we could just go from the hard courts to the dirt field and then the clay
28 courts.
Yeah, huge place.
It was on a college campus, so we had a cafeteria, library. Jackie Calla, she played at Amherst, and actually she likes to knit. And just last week, she sent me a pair of socks.
There you go.
Thanking me for helping her out over the years. With different experiences, talking about tennis camps, what about Harvard? We had Dave Fish on. I know you worked for Dave. You were his tennis director for a couple of summers. What was that like?
Well, Harvard was Harvard. I mean, it was really cool, of course, to be a part of that, but to be on that campus in the summer, to be in Boston, the number of kids, the number of coaches. I mean, for me, it was a great experience, both to be the lead coach, or they call it the director of the elite training program, 13 to 17, then eventually to become the director of tennis of the whole program, to run the orientation, to train the coaches. That was a really, positive experience for me, to work alongside Dave and his wife, Bonnie, super professional, organized, very smart, and just a really well-run, machine of a camp. And so a lot of the level of tennis was at its highest when they brought over some kids internationally who were they were more or less on a college tour of a lot of the big time colleges in the U.S. and kids from Spain and Brazil, and overall, you had some of the stronger players in the Boston area, but it was more of a social camp for the majority of the 10 weeks. And so we would do skits on a Friday and a lot of fun stuff like that. But just, it was a great experience.
I know they used our curriculum for 12 years. The first 5 years I went, and I used to tell people that I spoke during the Harvard commencement for 5 years. It was Bill Gates one year. I was there. But no, it was a large group of people. I wasn't talking to the Harvard graduates, but there was 40 coaches anyway.
Right. No, I think there were 30 coaches in the room when I was put on I think it was a 2 or 3 day orientation. I would sync up videos from, I think it's your Tennis Intelligence Applied course, and then I would talk about it and then go to the next video. And
for our listeners, that course is still up online, GreatBaseTennis.com. The quality of filming, Andy wasn't there when we filmed
Andy
that.
does not approve.
But I remember you went through that. Instead of using all 365 clips, you don't really need to do that.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember exactly how many clips or which clips I used, but it was really helpful to have that. But yeah, also the different people that I met during that time, a lot of them are still involved in tennis. Some of them, it was just kind of they were college players and it was just a summer gig. But one of the guys is now teaching pro in Delray as well, Adrian. I think you've met. He was on the staff there at Harvard, and Vlad, both Romanian guys actually. Vlad is who you've met also too. He's out in Romania coaching tennis, hitting partner for Simona Halep, and so yeah, just a lot of great relationships and great experiences.
I remember one summer I stayed with Dave and Bonnie, and they have 2 cars, and they gave me the directions to drive into Harvard, and they were going in at 4 a.m. and they were being nice to me. He said, well, Steve, if you leave here at 7, I said, oh, okay. So I get to a toll bridge and I asked the guy, it was maybe before GPS, or I didn't know how to use GPS, one of the two. So I asked the gentleman at the toll gate, I said, how do you get to Harvard? And he had the answer. He goes, that's easy, just study. But that's a magical place. Dave Fish, great ambassador for tennis, and he's, bleeding heart. He really feels for, like our curriculum, he's a big supporter of it. We tease and we tell people, we were laughing about that earlier, maybe it's, how's that go? It's, we could be crying. Laughter turned inside out. It's really tragic, but, people go, are you GreatBase? I'm GreatBase. What do you think about being GreatBase? We tell people that every other month we're going to change the name of it to Solid Fundamentals. Yes, we're teaching solid fundamentals.
I remember at Harvard as well, I think it's the oldest football stadium in America, and these massive steps. And to run that stadium, that was an incredible workout. That was an incredible fitness workout. But also, too, the second year that I went and was the director of tennis, Dave introduced me to Dominic Moore.
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually was coaching his wife 3 times a week. And I hit with Dominic after. He was a very good tennis player, someone who I think was part of Richard Hernandez's program in Toronto.
Yeah, but he played so much hockey.
Yeah.
Dominic, Katie, who you taught, unfortunately, she played soccer. She passed away at a very, very young age. But, he had a great career in the NHL. But he was traded so many times. Even though he's such a great player, he's traded many, many times. And in every city he went to, contact me, and we had someone trained in that city. But with Dominic, I remember working with Robert Steckley, who was very, very talented, same age group as Roger Federer. And Roger Federer one time was assigned, because he didn't have a coach, Steckley at the Canadian Open. And Steckley had really kind of been off the radar, just hanging out in Toronto. And Roger said, I always wondered what happened to him. He had more talent than the rest of us. So anyway, I went up to Dominic and I said, tell you what, if you could quit hockey for 4 weeks and come and see me every day, you see that kid, he's number 1 in Canada, I'll get you to beat him. Because, he just had that Canadian mentality. But what happened with Dominic is, and Richard's the one who really knows him well. Richard Hernandez grew up with a family, the 3 brothers, they all went to Harvard. As the grandfather was a really good hockey player, but he thought the sport was so rough. So the Moore boys, their father didn't play hockey. So hockey skipped a generation, but the father said, okay, the boys can play. But I know he actually, I don't know if you know that, but he plays some national or some international ITF 35s.
Oh, he does. No, he was a good player. I mean, we had some good hitting sessions for sure. But it's just great to be anytime you can be around a professional athlete. It's just a different level of competitiveness and
a $1 million player. But I remember going to some of the Lightning game with his former Katie's passed away. You got to get ice time, and I think that he could have flourished even more if he I think most every hockey player could say that. But I like to go off on a tangent when we talk about ice hockey. Trivia question: Bjorn Borg, Jan Tiriak. He asked, who are two great tennis players who actually played a match? I think it was in Madison Square Garden. Both they played on ice.
Oh,
played a tennis match wearing skates. Well, you've been down in this area 13 years, is that right? So I've known you 21. You said you've been here in South Florida.
I think it's 13 years. Yeah, my math could be bad there, but yeah, I've been down here. Been down here a while. I've created a great relationship and partnership with my business partner Allington Mutimer. We met kind of really day one of me moving down here, and Mike Darcy was our director of tennis, our fearless leader at the Delray Beach Tennis Center. And I'm sure most people know that site from the professional tournament, but we really, showed up at the Delray Beach Tennis Center around the same time, in which, coming out of the recession, the attendance at the junior program was more or less kind of one kid hitting on the backboard. And over time, as the landscape of the economy got stronger and the consistency of what we were doing in the junior program, the program really grew. And so, building a relationship with Allington and learning a lot from him. He was an award. I think he won a coach of the year award going back to 2004 in England. But he was a coach in Norwich, England for 20 years before he moved to the U.S. And so I learned a lot from him on court as well. And after 7 years at the Delray Tennis Center, we decided to take our show on the road and form our own business. And this is now kind of our second iteration of that business. But no, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of great memories, relationships, working with people, adults, kids, and training some coaches as well. So it's great to circle back and call myself a great baser.
Allington loves the game. He's a few years older than you. He's taught tennis a long time.
Yeah. He grew up, his mother was actually a tennis coach. And he grew up playing, and I think around the age of 14, 15, he did stop playing, but then he started coaching, as an adult, and he had another Smith in his corner, Martin Smith, great lefty, British, tennis player and coach in that area. And so they had a lot of really talented, the British players from that region. They were, I guess, technically a national training site, and so they would work with a lot of the top juniors in England. And of course, coming over here, he was shocked immediately by the level of, or the lack of the level of coaching in the U.S. I think he basically got the job at the Delray Tennis Center by walking past Atlantic Ave, and he saw the junior clinic that was going on, and he just thought, this guy's coaching here, I'm pretty sure I can get a job. So he walked in, and sure enough, he was hired as the assistant director to the tennis center. But and he's absolutely right. I think that the ball has been dropped, in terms of the education standards of a lot of people who teach. I think there's a lot of course, so many great coaches, but there's also many that really should not be coaching. And the process for certification in England is just much more demanding. What he had to go through to maintain his certification in England was much more than that you have to do in this country.
No, we should definitely 100% talk to him about that. Certification is not education. We spent quite a bit of time talking about Dennis Vandermeer. And, I'm a member of the USPTA, PTR, 40 years, give or take. I think more take, a lot of years. And in other words, add on at 40 plus it's a little bit too easy to make an understatement. 2 days and $200 and you're certified. But at the same time, I think it's more than 50% of the people teaching now are not certified.
Right.
So I think if you want to be critical of the PTR in this country or critical of the USPTA, that you got to be on the inside. You have to have gone through the test. You should really not even have a voice if you haven't gone through those programs. Mike Darcy. All these names, just a shout out to Mike Darcy. It's one thing with our alumni or network. He went to the 2-year program that we've talked about, Tyler Junior College. So he came down and he was at that was your in at the Delray Beach Tennis Center, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
I guess you said that with the Irishman. It works when you say about upstate New York. There's really 2 types of people in the world: those from upstate New York and those who wish they were. But we have to really plug the Irish. So tell us about Flanagan. Your parents, they blew it. Tell us that story.
So I think we were in the van, of course, at one point. Most of our time was either spent on the tennis court or in the van driving somewhere back and forth on Dale Mabry Highway. But
did I have the heat up?
The heat was on, cranking. It's 95 degrees.
That was a few years ago, listeners. So when people would tell me it was too hot, if you turn up the AC, I used to turn up the heat. I don't do that so much anymore. We got softer.
Heat was cranking, 95 degrees outside in the van. And Steve looks back in the rearview mirror and says, "Flanagan, your parents really screwed up." I'm a nervous teenager thinking, what's he going to say now? Probably yelling at me for eating a Pop-Tart when I shouldn't have been eating a Pop-Tart. Hopefully the nutritionist doesn't hear this. But so no, he said, your parents really screwed up. They should have named you Brendan instead of Brandon, which I think now looking back on it, I think you're totally right, Steve.
You can change it for $20.
I think I'm going to go, look into the paperwork.
Brendan Shanahan was a great hockey player. But our record is 17 languages. So a kid has a birthday, we get everybody in and we ham it up and we sing in 17 different languages. Even the tennis camp one is just where you sing loud. So, but for the most part, it's 17 languages. But I know how's it go with you? Stolat. So you're not 100% Irish.
So my mom's side is Polish, and so that was the side of the family that was lived more locally. So a lot of the get-togethers for birthdays or what have you, we were singing Stolat.
The history of Poland. So many tough things with the history of Poland. When I was a kid, we would drive through this town in upstate New York, going to a hockey game, and my father used to always say, it depends what time of the year it is, but especially if the snow wasn't up. But even if the snow was up, but the Polish people, he would just say, check out the gardens, check out the yards. Every sidewalk, if it was during the wintertime with snow. But my father used to just talk about the Polish people's work ethic every time we would drive through that town.
Hardworking people. My mom's a very hardworking person. So is my dad. But no, yeah, absolutely. She would talk, she still does talk a lot about her grandmother, her babcia, and she was... I think she directly emigrated from Poland. Oh,
the Poles after World War I, World War II, and then how they were so strong with really fighting for the Catholic churches not to become government buildings, and with. But tell us, FM. For me, I think of Fayetteville Manlius. Our listeners have heard me talk about Bill Aris, cross country coach, started as a volunteer, women's team. It's going to be one of the best cultures. One of the best cultures for sports in the U.S. But FM, tell us about FM's new performance center.
Sure. So FM stands for fundamentals. So no, FM is basically short for my last name and Allington's last name. But we ventured out on this incredible project that we're really excited about. The FM Tennis Performance Center. We have this beautiful space in Boynton Beach, Florida, 6,200 square feet. And what we're trying to do here is just to help tennis players improve their games off the court, not just on the court. And so we have specialists ranging from, of course, fitness coaches, personal trainers, performance nutritionists, mental performance coaches, physical therapy, massage therapy. So kind of the whole gamut of different modalities and mediums that someone might need to improve their game, whether it's recovering from an injury or injury, prehab, as you might call it, improving speed and agility, we'll even have a recovery room, hot and cold therapy, and a dedicated area for hitting tennis balls indoors, kind of like a tennis version of a batting cage. But I think the idea comes from really trying to be specific to what you're doing, in the gym or off the court to help improve your performance. And I think one of the best examples that I have, if you're looking to improve your fitness from a general standpoint, but you also play a lot of tennis, if you do happen to go to a personal trainer who doesn't know that much about tennis, their goals or their metrics of how they define your improvement in the gym are probably different, or sometimes can contrast with how someone who has more experience in the sport would help you. For instance, being in the fitness world myself, and having a lot of friends who are personal trainers, of course, if they get you to increase your muscle mass and decrease your body fat percentage, of course, that's a great side effect of personal training and working out in the gym. But depends if that is now a contraindication for having a tennis related injury. You're lifting too heavy, in which now you have tennis elbow, and so I've seen that happen. And so I think it's just a matter of having a really specific brand of training that can not only increase your physical fitness, but also improve your tennis. So you can do those two things at once.
So you have multiple sites. You have private schools, you have private clubs, you have a municipality, which is from your new fitness center, 8/10 mile down the road. Talk a little bit about recreation tennis. I always, think of recreation players, professional players, the forehand, just like you said. Okay, we have advanced players on one court and a beginner on the next court. Talk a little bit more about catering to the recreational player.
Sure. So we focus a lot of our energy on working with the recreational demographic, players, children or adults who probably aren't going to play more than a couple of times a week, for a few hours. And I think it's pretty clear, whether it's the particular child or the adults, the amount of time they can dedicate to that, how they're geared and what their goals are. But it's pretty clear early on, what path that player is going to take. And I think where there's a huge void in the sport of tennis is you have so many of the qualified coaches, that we talked about. More of the qualified coaches are investing their energy in, the advanced players, the ones who already are involved and have bought into the game and are supporting our sport. But I think where there needs to be more attention is qualified, reliable, consistent coaches investing their energy into, beginning players and beginning adults as well as beginning children. Because, we all really want the same thing. We want the sport of tennis to be in a healthy state in terms of, viewership and participation, and have to keep bringing new people into the mix. I think that the advanced players will find a way to keep playing, but a recreational beginner, if they don't like their first experience in the game, something I talked to Dave Fish a lot about recently is, if they don't like their first experience, they're going to go try something else. And so we were losing a lot of young kids and even, young adults and beginning adults because their first experience is not a positive one. So we've just tried to create different ways to have positive experiences for beginning and intermediate players, and even, of course, advanced players too. But like I said, they've already gotten to that point where they've bought in.
With Boca, 48 years ago, I got an airplane, 19 years old, this crazy idea. I was almost 20. I was going to start a journey in tennis and become a tennis teaching professional. I've had many students that have been, 30 plus years at a country club. Hats off. I don't want to take anything away from someone in that position, but sometimes, to be at a club in Boca, it's a pretty subservient role. And I think, Del Rey, Boynton Beach, the haves and the have-nots. But with loyalty, tell us about junior tennis. I mean, I've heard it said about this area, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. I don't think that's necessarily true at, say, a private club if you have great people skills and you're a little bit of a politician. But out there working with juniors, the loyalty, is this still the number one place for shopping and bopping? And And there's so much tennis here. There's so much confusion here. What are your comments on that?
Yeah, I think there is a certain lack of loyalty, in here, just like there probably is many places. I think if you can throw a stone, you're going to hit another kind of quote unquote tennis academy from where you stand. And I think that's just talking to Allington about that. That was never an issue for him back home because the places, the locations, weren't as available to someone growing up in Northern England. I think he's from Northern England. Don't know my geography too well, but no, I mean, there's so many different places to play here. And what I've found now is that the larger academies are having a harder time. And then you see that these kind of smaller niche academies, 4 players, 6 players with, one or 2 coaches, are kind of popping up. And simple for them, they can just rent a court or 2 courts somewhere, and they don't need to have an entire facility at their disposal. And they'll travel with those kids to tournaments and very specialized. And so, at least from my experience, what I've seen is the days of a huge kind of like how Balteri's Academy was in the 80s. I don't know if we'll see that again. Hundreds of kids.
Years and years ago in Florida, going back to the 70s, there was all these municipalities. You could just go down to, Miami and say, okay, Flamingo Park, North Miami, I think at David Park, now the Jimmy Everett Tennis Center, Holiday Park. And the players usually just congregate. I know a gentleman used to say there's 20 people here on any given day compete in 20 different ways. But what happens when a golf course is developed, the luxury homes are put in, the townhouses are put in. Sometimes, tennis, hate to say it, we're just an amenity to golf. And there's 6 courts here and 6 courts there. And I think it was much healthier. And that's one good thing about indoor tennis. There's only so many indoor tennis clubs, so people come in and they actually can see what everybody's doing. But here in Florida, especially, it's the land of the car trunk pro.
Right.
Is you don't really have a very good idea of what everyone's doing. So I find that the consumer can just be saturated. It's just so much tennis. It's hard to, have consumer awareness.
Yeah, and there was a period of time, of course, in Delray. At the Delray Tennis Center, we were building up this junior program and got to the point where the kids were winning tournaments and they were progressing and they were doing really well. And then as we went out on our own, we were at Indian Spring Country Club just down the road in Boynton Beach. As we went out on our own, under the name of an academy, the Flanagan Mutimer Tennis Academy, a mouthful, but we did still work with a lot of, I know you don't love the word, but high performance players. And, we felt that was a part of the market that was really saturated. There were a lot of qualified coaches vying for a very few number of kids. And it's just like I said before, I think from a big picture standpoint, it's just not healthy for the game of tennis. We need more qualified coaches working with the beginners.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier with Julian Krinsky, great guy, and a great friend for a long time. I was hired by him in the 80s to train his staff up in Philadelphia. He used to have a huge tennis camp. And he used to say that 95% of the pros are chasing 5% of the business. And instead of flipping around where it's, to be, 5% of the pros chasing 95% of the business, to coach that next champion, everyone's a champion. Everyone should just be given the best instruction. And I think that's where it's we repeat ourselves often here, the merchant of flash, the third base coach, the person who's out there hustling the kid who can already score. Tennis would be so much healthier if people were really good at teaching beginners. And it's a very difficult sport. So to walk through the FM Performance Center, it's got a really good vibe, a little photo of John McEnroe and old school and Bjorn Borg. But so you walk in, you have an office, and then you have room for PTs, physical therapists. Then you have across the hall, you have the ice room, right? And then you have a large area for the fitness crew.
Yep.
And then you have sports psychologists, nutritionists, and a masseuse. We
also have yoga. Yeah, we have interesting tennis-specific yoga. So just to focus on, the muscle groups that tennis players are having trouble with in terms of flexibility and even stability and strength. A lot of that core strength and stability from yoga training as well. So yeah, it's a great crew, great team, amazing people, super qualified, motivated, and they're all passionate about helping adult athletes, youth athletes. They're passionate about it. So it's really worked out in terms of getting that team together, and so really excited to get started.
Last question. I mean, we'll follow up and get a chance to talk to the team you have in place. Tell us about the Mcenroe Borg T-shirt.
So yeah, Mcenroe Borg 1980 U.S. Open turning point in both players' careers. I think is that.
Yeah,
from a tennis historian standpoint. I don't think Bjorn Borg was ever really the same. I think, Johnny Mack winning that match. So yeah, just it's a play off the Reagan Bush ad from '84. But that was a big match, and just a fun way to get a T-shirt design out there.
No, that's good. We'll have to come back. I mean, Posey stories. Andy's always telling us we want to try to give out value with our podcast, so we want to just talk about Posey stories. But give us one Posey story. Posey's a guy who got cut from his Division III team, came to work with us, and grinded it out. And everybody loves Posey. Actually, his first name's John, but no one ever calls him John. Give us a Posey story.
Just
put
Posey.
You on the spot.
Here's a Posey story. So he was always trying to find a way to get better, right? So he still had this late 1980s Pete Sampras racket, 85 square inches. I think eventually we convinced him to get a Babolat just to try to modernize his game a little bit. But no, he's always trying to find a way to get better. And one time he kind of looks me square in the eyes, so serious. He goes, "Yeah, I just think that if I could invent a new shot that no one else has thought of." I'm thinking, I don't know. It's going to be a tough one, but I think he's still working on it.
With Posey. Guy could read a snowstorm. But no, thanks a lot. We look forward to talking to you more about what you're doing and also your team. But anyway, adios, amigos.
Adios.
Thanks for listening.